In tonight's terrifying tale, we take you deep into the cursed lands of Blackwater Swamp, where the dead don't rest, and danger lurks beneath the murky waters. Swamp of the Dead will send chills down your spine as a group of friends uncover the horrifying secret buried for centuries, unleashing the undead upon the deep south. Warning Skull. Will they escape the cursed swamp, or will they become part of the nightmare? Watch if you dare, but don't forget to like, comment, and share this thrilling zombie story with your friends. Let us know in the comments what you would do if zombies rose from a cursed swamp near you. Hit subscribe to never miss a spine-chilling tale from the Zombie Story Zone.
Sultry depths of the deep south, shrouded in thick fog and decaying moss, there was a place no one dared to visit, the cursed lands of Blackwater Swamp. Tales of the swamp had been passed down for generations, stories whispered at twilight around campfires, warning of the fate that awaited those who ventured too far into the dark, murky waters. The local town of Darrow, nestled on the edge of the swamp, had long learned to respect its boundaries. For as long as anyone could remember, Blackwater Swamp had been the source of strange happenings. Hunters never returned, strange lights flickered above the water at dusk, and on windless nights eerie, ghostly wails echoed through the town. No one could say for sure what lived out there, but the old-timers swore it was the work of a curse cast by an ancient witch whose wrath had poisoned the swamp. Eli Caldwell had heard all the stories. He'd grown up in Darrow, a small, sleepy town with little to do but work the land or fish the rivers. He'd always had a wild streak, an adventurer's heart that craved excitement. While most people in town stayed well clear of Blackwater Swamp, Eli was different. To him, the swamp wasn't a place of fear but a mystery waiting to be solved. Eli had been drawn to the tales of the swamp his whole life, especially the one about the witch. The story went that a woman named Mariah Halloway, accused of witchcraft, had been hunted by the townsfolk of Darrow in the late 1700s. After being chased into the swamp, she disappeared without a trace, but before vanishing, she cursed the land and all who dared trespass. Some said that on stormy nights, her spirit roamed the swamp, calling out to the dead to rise and take vengeance on the living. Eli, skeptical of such legends, saw it as nothing more than a local ghost story to scare children. But as much as he dismissed it, part of him wanted to know the truth. One sweltering August afternoon, Eli's curiosity got the better of him. He gathered a group of friends, his girlfriend Rachel, her cousin Dean, and their mutual friend Sarah, and pitched the idea of camping near the swamp. They were a tight-knit group, always up for adventure, and despite the ominous warnings from the townsfolk, they agreed to join Eli. After all, it was just a camping trip, right? How dangerous could it really be? Armed with flashlights, tents, and more bravado than common sense, the four friends set off in Eli's old pickup truck toward the edge of the swamp. The drive took them down a winding dirt road that seemed to grow narrower the closer they got to Blackwater Swamp. Tall cypress trees with gnarled branches loomed overhead, casting long shadows across the dirt path. The air was thick with humidity, and the distant sound of cicadas filled the silence as the sun began to dip below the horizon. By the time they arrived at their destination, the swamp was cloaked in twilight. The water, dark and still, reflected the fading light of the day, and the dense canopy overhead made it feel as if they had entered another world. They set up camp at the swamp's edge, not far from the waterline, the smell of damp earth and decaying vegetation heavy in the air. "I don't like this," Rachel said, wrapping her arms around herself as she looked out toward the swamp. "It feels wrong here." Dean snorted. "You scared of some old swamp? It's just a bunch of water and trees. There's no such thing as curses." Sarah, ever the practical one, nodded in agreement. "It's probably just superstition, but still, I wouldn't want to get lost out here." Eli shrugged off their concerns, eager to prove that the stories were nothing but nonsense. He lit a campfire, and soon they were laughing, telling stories, and roasting marshmallows. The night was calm, save for the occasional splash of something in the water, probably fish or frogs, Eli thought. But as the fire crackled and the night deepened, an uneasy tension began to creep into the camp. It started with the wind, or rather, the lack of it. The air grew unnaturally still, the leaves stopped rustling, and the usual buzz of insects faded into silence. Eli noticed first, his brow furrowing as he glanced around. "You guys hear that?" "Hear what?" Dean asked, oblivious. "Exactly," Eli said. "It's too quiet." Rachel stiffened, glancing nervously toward the swamp. "Maybe we should leave." But before anyone could respond, a low, distant moan echoed across the water. It was faint at first, like the sound of the wind picking up, but it grew louder, closer, until it became unmistakable. A guttural, otherworldly wail that seemed to come from all around them. Eli's heart raced as he stood, gripping his flashlight tightly. What the hell was that? Dean, ever the skeptic, tried to laugh it off. Probably some animal. Maybe a gator. "That's no gator," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. The moaning continued, and then, without warning, the swamp came alive. The water churned violently as if something massive was moving beneath the surface. The ground beneath their feet shook, and from the thick, swirling mist rising off the swamp, shadowy figures began to emerge. At first, they were little more than silhouettes, but as they moved closer, their grotesque forms became clearer. They were human, or at least they had been once. Their bodies were bloated and rotting, their skin pale and slick with mud, their eyes hollow and glowing with an unnatural light. They moved with a jerky, uncoordinated gait, but their speed was alarming. The stench of death and decay filled the air as more of them crawled out of the swamp, their low growls mixing with the rustle of disturbed water. "Run!" Eli shouted, grabbing Rachel's hand and bolting toward the truck. Dean and Sarah were right behind them, but the creatures were closing in fast. As they reached the vehicle, Eli fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking. He could hear the guttural growls getting closer, the sound of wet footsteps squelching through the mud. "Come on, Eli, hurry!" Rachel cried, her voice trembling with panic. Finally, Eli managed to unlock the truck, and they piled inside, slamming the doors shut. He turned the key in the ignition, and the engine roared to life. Without a second thought, he floored the gas pedal, sending the truck speeding down the dirt road. In the rearview mirror, Eli caught a glimpse of the creatures, their dead eyes following them as they disappeared into the mist. For a moment, the group sat in stunned silence, the only sound the thrum of the engine and their own ragged breathing. "What the hell were those things?" Sarah finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No idea," Eli replied, his hands still gripping the steering wheel tightly. "But whatever they are, we need to get out of here." As they sped away from the swamp, the night seemed to grow darker, the fog thicker. It wasn't long before they realized something was wrong. The dirt road that had taken them to the swamp now seemed to twist and turn in impossible directions. The headlights barely penetrated the fog, and no matter which way Eli turned, the road seemed to loop back on itself. "We're lost," Dean said, his voice laced with fear. Eli cursed under his breath, his frustration mounting. "This isn't right. We should have hit the main road by now." As they rounded a bend, the truck suddenly skidded to a halt, the tires sinking into the mud. Eli cursed again, slamming his fists against the steering wheel. They were stuck. "Everyone out. We'll have to push it free." Reluctantly, the group climbed out of the truck, the thick fog swirling around them. Eli and Dean moved to the back to try to push, but as they struggled with the mud, the familiar low moan returned, echoing through the trees. "Oh no," Rachel whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "They're coming." Eli looked up, his heart sinking as he saw the shadowy figures emerging from the fog once more. The undead had found them. "We need to move now," he yelled. The group scrambled to gather their belongings, but the zombies were already closing in. This time, there was no running to the truck. They had to escape on foot, but the dense fog made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Eli led the way, cutting through the thick underbrush as fast as he could. Behind him, he could hear the wet, squelching footsteps of the undead, their growls growing louder. His mind raced. There had to be a way out of this nightmare. If the curse was real, maybe there was a way to break it. They stumbled through the swamp for what felt like hours, the oppressive fog and darkness disorienting them at every turn. Finally, they came across something that stopped them in their tracks. A dilapidated old cabin, half sunken into the swamp's murky waters. Its rotting walls and broken windows gave it an eerie, haunted look, but something about it called to Eli. This was it. This was the place the legend spoke of, the witch's cabin. This is where it all started, Eli muttered.